Thought I was making the transition over to shorter videos, did you? No way, dude. This movie needs to be appreciated, and as such, it deserves way more than 5 minutes of my time. And yours, for that matter. Do not misquote me when I say Greta Gerwig's Barbie is absolutely excellent. Before I get into any of that, though, can we just talk about the nerve Mattel had to make Barbie dolls based on the Barbie outfits from this movie? Like, how little self-awareness do you have to just let Greta Gerwig make a big-budget Hollywood movie that brought in over $1 billion and received nothing but positive reviews, unless it was from a middle-aged homophobe, but who gives a shit about their opinions, and then you not only go right back to capitalizing on the success of your dolls like you always have, but use this movie that called you out on those principles as an excuse to do that? Bro's got balls. Back in April, the trailer for the live-action Barbie movie was unveiled. Just based on that sentence, you're probably thinking, oh god, first Monster High, now this. Another childhood icon falls victim to the plague of live-action adaptations. Then you'd watch the trailer, making sure to put on your hazmat suit because nothing can prepare you for what you're about to see. You would be confused. The appeal of this trailer that spread across the internet like a wildfire was that, well, you couldn't tell from the trailer who the movie was for. Like, yeah, it's Barbie, but why are the lead actors Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling? Why is Greta Gerwig in the director's chair? That all spells an adult movie, but nothing in this trailer seems explicitly adult. The set design, dialogue, and deliberately bad effects all make me think it's for kids, but there are these warning signs everywhere that maybe it's for the older crowd. Is it a generic comedy flick about how wacky the real world is in contrast with the aggressively pink Barbie Land? Is it a dystopian horror surrounding the corruption in Barbie Land and how much it says about society or whatever? Is it a social commentary on anorexia? Oh, that would be my favorite thing in the whole world. If the trailer did explicitly spell out what the movie was, I probably wouldn't have stayed on the hype train. I doubt a lot of others would have either. It was the ambiguity that made so many of the millions of people who watched the trailer want to see it. From then on, I avoided any future commercials or promotional material to the best of my ability. I wanted to be surprised by this movie I would have otherwise had no interest in. But the question is, was I? Yes! How could I not love it? It was essentially the perfect blend of laughs, feels, and intellect. I was just in disbelief of how this movie blended the entire sum of its parts so seamlessly. The writing was tight and balanced, the actors killed it, the soundtrack was bursting with personality, the set design was applaudable, the social commentary on the patriarchy never feels out of place, and overall, it was just one of those rare movies where nearly everything worked. That's so hard to pull off, as movies truly are the product of everyone involved, not just the directors or writers. Actors are free to suggest lines for their characters, the costume department does all the heavy lifting with how the character dresses, ensuring that their attire complements them, and the list goes on. So you know it's an accomplishment when there were so many of those departments that not only did their job, but made their work so apparent with how well they did it, that I actively tried to think of one reason not to give this movie a 10 out of 10. Can I elaborate? Yeah, so I will, that's why I gathered you all here today. But why did I decide to make this film analysis for October's video, as opposed to something spooky? Because it fits with my costume, cope and seethe. Have you ever heard the expression, putting someone in a box? Well, that's what this movie is all about. You might be thinking, well yeah, I figured. But I don't simply mean packaging a Barbie doll and shipping it off to the real world. I mean stereotyping. I mean limiting people exclusively to the roles society expects of them. I mean treating people like objects or appliances. It unfortunately happens all the time, and the worldwide phenomenon that is Barbie inadvertently represents all that. I'm a dude who's all about crushing gender norms, because maybe they do more harm than good? You'd be more surprised to learn that Barbie is a movie that plays a lot into gender norms for comedic effect, but it's also about sending a message. There's a lot to say about tearing down the patriarchy. And if you don't know what the patriarchy is, what comes to mind when you think of Barbie Land? The Barbies, of course. Who comes to mind when you think of Barbie and Ken? Barbie, of course. Barbie comes to mind because the doll franchise is called Barbie. The opening narration from Helen Mirren is all about how Barbie as a franchise reinforces the idea that girls can be anything. The dolls all having different occupations is meant to be inspiring. The way they stand up tall, looking picture perfect, whether they be a doctor, cowgirl, astronaut, the whole shebang, is supposed to send a positive message to the girlies they're trying to appeal to that they can be anything. And who would be so responsible for running such a joint with intentions so inspiring? Men. Think about that scene where Barbie meets Will Ferrell, the Mattel CEO. Keep in mind that he, a real-world man, runs this real-world corporation alongside his real-world yes-men, and Barbie is an airhead who had a perfect little life until she went flat-footed for some reason yesterday. One of a few questions this movie asks that leads into its commentary is, if some Barbie doll who has only ever known a perfect world were to enter ours, would they be pleased to know the truth about the real world? The capitalist society where food costs money and thereby everyone prioritizes money so highly? Yeah, it's not the kind of environment I want to welcome my kids into. But if Barbie's characterization is anything to go by, it seems like I'll have to do that. That's kinda like what Barbie is in the real world. Someone who was born yesterday, or at least is like that, because she quite literally just entered the world. She looks at all the men in the CEO's office, and without complaining, she simply asks purely out of curiosity where all the ladies are. It's a fair question, dang it. Wasn't this franchise nonetheless created by a woman because she had such faith that her daughter could be anything? And now we live in a world where this organization, which in the first place was made to empower girls, has been run by men for long enough to have lost sight of those roots? Isn't that bullcrap? Well, Barbie doesn't think so yet, she's just asking. And yet, Will Ferrell still feels the need to get defensive and bargain with her as they talk about all the things they've done just to give off the illusion of progress. All the gender-neutral bathrooms they have, or that one headquarters somewhere that was run by a woman. Not to mention all of Will Ferrell's friends who are Jews. Okay, now's not the time for Jew jokes, everybody, my bad. Anyway, these men are planning one Barbie doll after the next, all limited to one outfit and one function. Remember how perfect these dolls are supposed to look and feel while being so limited, despite being just as human as the men who put those constraints on them? Yeah, is this starting to feel like an allegory? Barbie, who again is airheaded from all her time in fantastical Barbie land, doesn't understand what Sasha and her friends mean when they talk about how Barbie made them feel objectified by fascism, and set the feminist movement back because of how it all represents turning women into one-trick humans. However, it's still enough to break her heart. The real world hits Barbie like a truck and shatters her innocence in the process. She was unaware of the dominance of men in the real world because it's almost entirely the other way around in Barbie land. This Barbie's president, this Barbie's in space, and Ken only ever comes in when it's Barbie and Ken. Ken's not as marketable though, so he gets less attention. Ultimately, when you're able to compare Barbie land to the real world, it might feel better to just go back to Barbie land. Except nope, Ken studied the patriarchy in the real world and brought back an extraordinary gift. Now what? Is this movie being subtle with its commentary? No, absolutely not, not in the slightest. They bring up gender norms and dive headfirst into them, with wonderfully uncomfortable lines such as,
"I'm a man with no power, does that make me a woman?"
As well as the ladies knowing exactly how to distract the Kens while they take back Barbie land, letting them play guitar, mansplain The Godfather, etc. Are these offensive or touchy subjects? Oh yeah, to some people at least. However, it's a more than necessary evil. Addressing the elephant in the room is the first part of getting it out. They really meant it in the trailer when they said, if you love Barbie, this movie is for you, but also if you hate Barbie. It's also well done in the way it creatively shows the influence of men on women. But just then, the two writers ask themselves, are we stereotyping guys as a sex? How are all men gonna take this? It's more difficult to find a parallel to real life when it comes to the Barbies being on top and the Kens feeling victimized or jealous as a result. Especially since this movie is about the patriarchy, which, again, has it the other way around. Well, men may be putting women in boxes both inside and outside of Mattel HQ, but in doing so, we also inadvertently give them a lot of attention. If you think a chick is pretty, it's easy to want her all to yourself to do just one thing for your benefit. And although plenty of people are smart enough nowadays to know that this is a black and white mindset, it's hard to work your way out of what feels like your factory settings. It's easy for guys to feel like their girl is their better half, or like she is more lively and eccentric than them, and makes them feel not exciting enough as a result, so then that leads to insecurities and projecting. But then women reasonably stand up for their own rights, and unreasonably say stuff like #KillAllMen that makes men feel bad about themselves, and we just get caught in this pointless little gender stereotype cycle that, you know, why does it really exist? When you come down to it, gender has nothing to do with personality, so why do genders even exist? I'm a man who cries himself to sleep, does that make me a woman? I'm a man who knows a couple Hamilton songs by heart, does that make me a woman? I'm a man who doesn't like dodgeball and is tired of pretending to, does that make me a woman? I'm a man who felt spoken to on a deeper level by this movie, does that make me a woman? See that? That is the issue. Why do men and women ever neglect or mistreat each other for reasons associated with being the opposite sex? That is the question. And with nothing but an allegory of Barbie and Ken dolls, this movie gave all that food for thought and reinforcement that it's not Barbie, it's not Ken, and it's not Barbie and Ken. It's Barbie, and it's Ken. God, I'm so happy this movie exists for the messages alone. And I'm not even close to done talking about all the stuff I loved about it. Fuck gender norms, but bless you, Greta Gerwig.
Greta Gerwig is a national treasure!
I couldn't be happier that this movie made me a fan of yours.
Oh man, I can't take this anymore!
Regardless of your expectation for this movie with such ambiguous marketing, you'd be shocked by how sad this movie gets. I'm not going to take as much time to talk about the emotional beats in particular, since I touched upon a lot of them already as I talked about the commentary. Maybe, we'll see. But essentially, this movie is to a lesser extent than the patriarchy about existentialism. Everything is perfect in Barbie land, right? Well, let me make something clear. I'm a guy who writes and draws comic strips. How does the humor of those comic strips come to be? I usually just think of someone or something that could be funny. A magician who runs a shady nursing home? That has potential. A sober vegetarian with a gambling problem having a nightmare about all the temptations he spent years trying to avoid? Sure. A charcuterie board? Okay, there's a developing idea, but I haven't written a joke about a charcuterie board before, have I? Yeah, I'll go for it. With that kind of first-hand experience writing something funny, I get the feeling that Greta Gerwig's thought process was, what if a Barbie doll with a head full of air entered the real world? That could be funny. The main thing that sets a single solitary 3-panel comic strip apart from a big-budget Hollywood flick is that one takes more time to consume than the other for the audience. I'll give you 3 guesses which is which. So Gerwig, and also Noah Baumbach, had to go the extra mile. They went all out, beyond the base level question, and said, nay, what if a Barbie doll with a head full of air entered the real world and made a handful of jokes about genitals? And what's her motivation to enter the real world? Gotta make sure to ask that question. There, now we're cooking with gas. Barbie's perfect life gets interrupted with what she initially refers to as thoughts of death. Plain and simple. Do dolls actually die? Keep that idea in your back pocket. But where does this plot point go? I mean, who knows? Maybe that's a stupid question. Well, as I mentioned, Barbie gets her dreams crushed by the cold splashes of reality, and that's heartbreaking. It really is like watching a kid grow up and out of their own little world to realize it's not all it's cracked up to be. How about when Barbie is using her Barbie senses to figure out who was playing with her, so she malfunctioned like she did? She sits down on a park bench in the shade and simply lets somebody's life flash before her eyes. But she also looks back and forth from the park to the playground, noticing a similar contrast in innocence and maturity. Carefree childhood memories such as playing with friends in a sandbox, as opposed to the trials and tribulations of growing up. Difficulty in relationships, loss, loneliness, forgetting how much you mean to those around you or how lovable you really are. This all parallels Barbie's personal transformation caused by her entrance to the real world so perfectly. And it was such a good choice, be it on behalf of either the writers, director, or whoever else, to just allow her to be sad and cry for the first time. I love how Barbie doesn't even speak while she lets her eyes fill with tears. The scene opts to show us the sad effects of growing up, rather than telling or spelling it out for the audience. I genuinely have to respect the movie for that though, as it would have been so easy for Barbie the airhead to look around and outright say, wow, the real world is actually really sad. But no. A Barbie doll suddenly roaming the earth, who wasn't made to feel and doesn't know how to feel, is finally allowing herself to do so as it dawns upon her that nobody is stopping her. It might seem random how this helps her find the girl who played with her, but then as she interacts with the girl and her mom, she realizes that it was all because the girl accordingly suffered from a whiplash in her own mood as she got older. But the intelligence of the way it all ties together just becomes a bonus when you compare it to everything else in the scene. It's such an emotionally intelligent piece that I've never seen anything quite like. So much so that I almost don't want to see it anywhere else, since it feels so unique to this one scene in this one movie that I love dearly. As if that wasn't enough, think back to the mom's speech that I just spent all that time paraphrasing. Thanks to all the people pushing us around, it's easy to feel like you're not enough. Women, just for being women, have to stay the perfect shape, the perfect personality, stay patient lest they be accused of complaining, or just not living up to expectations, forced into pretending everything is fine, and that's the worst feeling. And again, am I a woman just because I relate to that? Isn't it just depressing? No one should ever feel stuck in a box, let alone because of their gender. To really get an allegorical message across, a movie has to make you feel empathy for the group the allegory is about. Maybe I'm abusing the word allegory, since an allegory usually has a subtle illusion that allows the audience to put 2 and 2 together for themselves, rather than explicitly spelling it out, but I still think the craft of both the writers and the cast is executed masterfully. Not just because the speech hits me in all the right spots, but mainly because of what it all leads to. You were waiting for me to bring it up. Ruth and Barbie disappear into a room that's light but not too bright. After all the things about reality that shattered Barbie along the way, even though it would be so much easier to go right back into the denial that Barbie Land now represents for her, she wants to become human. She realizes how much better she would feel knowing that she was someone who, despite knowingly having a finite lifespan and moments where she won't be comfortable, is continuing to create and carry on a legacy that represents family and love. She would no longer just be the product. And once she expresses all this to the woman who created her and named her after her daughter, she realizes that she doesn't need to ask for humanity. Because there's a little bit of that, not just in all of us, but in all the things we create with love and passion. From stories, to dolls, to a really good hamburger, the list goes on. She again closes her eyes and lets herself be sad, as memories of all the life stages between birth and motherhood fill her mind. This montage consists of all the things Barbie, named after Ruth Handler's daughter, truly represents. All the stages of growing up play before us, without skipping a beat, and as the somber piano and Billie Eilish's lighter-than-air vocals beautifully complement this turn of events, we close the curtain on this powerful note. It's flawless. Well, except for the one thing my mom objected to. Roll the clip! In Greta Gerwig's Barbie, Ruth Handler says this.
We mothers stand still so our daughters can look back to see how far they've come.
This iconic line was my mom's one issue with this movie that otherwise is basically perfect. I get what Ruth meant, and it was sweet of her to say, but my mom was like, so women just don't go any further after they become mothers? What's that supposed to mean? I find that to be a really compelling perspective. After all, I know an amazing lady who not only crushes being a mom, but is also super friendly, funny, open-minded, compassionate, hardworking, and still has a ton of great accomplishments down the road. I just know it. Still, through her busy and chaotic life, she simply wins the day with her love of her family and her friends. She's been that way for years, before and after becoming a mom, and I couldn't be happier that I'm related to her. Colleen, it's Colleen. Oh, and I guess that all applies to my mom too. You know, when you factor in my mom's perspective, it is kind of weird. Ruth, you want to say you stood still? Like, you created this whole doll chain, and of course you did more after you became a mother, but I get you. I get what you meant. A for effort. You know, similarly to the movie, I feel like that could have accordingly been a really emotionally powerful note to end the video on and leave you all with some food for thought and tears in your eyes. But I also feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh yeah, I couldn't have glossed over this. If you look this movie up, what's the alleged genre? Ah yes, comedy. And it better be, because quite honestly, that was my biggest takeaway from the movie the first time I saw it. I mean hell, the movie opens with whatever this is. The revolution that was the invention of an adult female doll, not just a baby. It's so absurd the way the doll stands tall, towers over all the other girls, and causes them to smash the baby dolls on impact in favor of playing with this new thing. Did I bore you explaining that? You just had to be there. I was just giggling in disbelief of what I was watching, while also sympathizing with the poor confused souls walking into the theater a minute late. The dopamine hit attached to this hilariously weird opening scene was so strong, and it was only the first. The next scene where Barbie kicks her perfect day off, complete with the Lizzo song about how perfect the day is, and so is the color pink, all the way up through the beach and dance party scenes and the bad day version of the Lizzo song. Oh, it just had me grinning from ear to ear for 10 minutes straight until the slightly more serious scene where she meets Weird Barbie. Very few movies can manage that, no matter how much I love them, and it's a crying shame. It was so much fun to watch a grown adult get so into the role of a Barbie doll, and just imagine how she feels in this world where nothing is actually real. Warm shower, perfect breakfast, every Barbie says hi to Barbie as she Barbies her way through Barbie Land. But oh no, now the day has gone bad, and the fake shower is cold, and the plastic milk expired forever ago, and K is for death. What's going on? This movie is cold. I was considering dedicating another section to this, but it'll take less time to talk about, so I figure I'll just get it out of the way now that the acting in this movie is on fleek. It's hilarious how the actors just get so deep, like waist deep into their roles. Let me tell you, I lived for the way they deliberately overacted and hammed it up just to be funny, because damn it sure as hell worked. Margot Robbie just feels right at home as Barbie. I don't even know how to describe it, she just does. She has so much fun with her role, but also calms down and is sad when necessary, but not as much so as Ryan Gosling's Ken, holy shit. You probably don't need me to tell you this, but Ryan Gosling absolutely defined a Ken-eration with his performance. He really is the one that comes to mind when I talk about the deliberately hammy acting in this movie. Sure, it can be easy to do, but it fits so well in this movie, what with everyone being a bunch of airheaded guy dolls and doll dolls. It's so much fun how they act like stereotypical men and women in 2023, both in Barbie Land and in the real world. From Ken saying, "Let me come over to your house tonight, Barbie, because we're girlfriend and boyfriend," or not realizing that you're not supposed to pose for a prison photo shoot, or seeing the influence of men in the real world, or grabbing a bunch of books about why men are literally the best thing to both proceed and succeed sliced bread, or the whole thing about the Mojo Dojo Casa House. I could go on and on about how well this guy did, and that's not even mentioning his power ballad, which is my newest sing-along, Kryptonite. I don't know about you, but I can't remember the last time I saw a movie where Ken dolls got so jealous of the women surrounding them that they immediately put together an 11th hour power ballad and got into a fight with a bunch of inflatable horses, lacrosse sticks, and deliberately bad effects and hitting each other in the balls, only to realize that they were so caught up in their ballad / I want song that was also kind of a villain song that they forgot it was election day, and now the fate of the Barbie Land Constitution is in the hands of the Barbies they were trying to take down in the first place. Like, who came up with that? Not a chatbot. Get it together, CEOs. It's mind-boggling that this movie came out smack in the middle of both the writers and actors strike. After this movie not only raked in over $1 billion, but generated nothing but good things. And still through all that, greedy zillionaires think they could carry a movie entirely without any of that undefinably unique writing and acting. They unironically think they're the only ones who earned any of that money, and it disgusts me. Thank the Lord that the writer's strike is over, but please support SAG-AFTRA. You couldn't have done this without the actors. I don't have all the time in the world to go over every actor that stole the show, they all slayed. But before I move on, some noteworthy mentions have to go to Michael Cera's Alan and Will Ferrell the Mattel CEO again. Without looking for any deeper meaning, "we have gender-neutral bathrooms at the wazoo" is just a really funny line. And both of these guys are as talented and charming as they've been in quite a while. Actually, here's a fun game that my family came up with the other time. Say you can only have 3 Will Ferrell movies for the rest of your life, what are they? I personally went with this, the Lego Movie, and of course, well, Step Brothers. That one's not really a question. Sorry, Elf, sacrifices must be made. Feel free to leave yours in the comments. Oh, and yeah, I'm gonna remember Michael Cera for this role a lot more than anything else I've seen him in. Mainly because I can't remember anything else I've seen him in off the top of my head, so exactly my point. It's hard to go on about the comedy in the same way I did with the emotional scenes or the social commentary, since it's sprinkled here and there much more than it's placed directly in front of the audience. But remember how I said this movie was essentially the perfect mix of humor, intellect, and emotion? Well, yeah, it is. And that's absolutely something to be proud of. It leaves me wondering how this movie is even real, because it pulled off what most comedy movies struggle greatly to do. At the end of the day, stories really exist to tell us morals. Not focus exclusively on or spoon-feed that moral, but send a message in a memorable way that people can learn from and praise the movie for teaching it to them. Still, if it can even be described or listed in the genre of comedy, I should be able to laugh at it, and in the best case scenario, remember that aspect of the movie just as much. Thankfully, I did in this movie's case. But how does this movie blend elements together and invoke so many different emotions in its audience so seamlessly, without any sense of tonal whiplash? Well, it's a little something I like to call taking turns in the spotlight rather than sharing it. The classic example, or at least one that comes to mind for me, is one I'm sure you're all pretty well aware of. But just in case you're not, mild spoiler warning for Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. In the film, Puss, the titular bitchular, has to overcome his anxiety about being down to the last of his 9 lives. He can't just be careless about getting into danger anymore. Next time he parties too hard, the legend will in fact die. Like Chris Farley! This anxiety is personified by the main villain of the film, Death, except it's a character. What follows Puss's close encounter with Death is an extremely fun and creative adventure movie with some unlikely allies as they race to get their hands on the also titular Last Wish. There's plenty of great humor, gorgeous animation, fast-paced and edge-of-your-seat action, but keep in mind, some of Puss being careless with his life, of which he only has one left, leads through into all that. He has another brush with Death as he makes his way out of one action sequence, and a lot of subtle details are implemented to enhance the scene. His fur stands on end, his eyes widen, his heart starts to audibly pound, and he runs away from Death in terror of what could happen to him. This is where Puss's eccentric companion and aspiring therapy dog, Perrito, comes in. Up until this point in the movie, Perrito has been a big little goofball, offering quick and easy solutions to difficult problems, and just being an innocent comic relief the whole time. However, being himself and always wanting to help, he notices Puss hyperventilating by a tree. Letting the moment speak for itself, Perrito wordlessly conveys how brokenhearted he is to see a friend like this, and just gently rests his head on Puss's lap, giving the poor gato someone, anyone, to hold on to in a moment where he isn't fine. This is still a comedy movie, but one that takes time out of its comedy and quick snappy fight scenes to acknowledge and illustrate that death is scary, but there will always be people there to help us face and accept difficult fears. Nobody says, "Wow, Puss, you look worse than that Rocky Dennis kid from Mask," or "Wow, I guess Perrito really did become a therapy dog." The moment plays out as realistically as possible, and uses set pieces like the dark atmosphere, the gloomy color palette, and the lack of dialogue to make the audience see and feel themselves in the character's shoes. Where does the movie go from this surprisingly realistic portrayal of a panic attack? Well, Puss and Perrito take a moment to talk about life, and they slowly, naturally transition back into the adventure as they meet back up with Kitty Softpaws. Because doesn't that feel like the most reasonable and realistic solution to you? And now for the tying it all back together question. How does this compare to Barbie? Our own stereotypical Barbie wakes up from a dream about being in an irrepressible thoughts of death Barbie commercial, which is already hilarious, but then is woken up by Weird Barbie, who is also hilarious, and then she's taken back to Weird Barbie's place, and the mom gives that heartbreaking and moving speech, which is not meant to be hilarious. But the movie lets the sad monologue take hold, while not clashing with the humor. Well, only a little bit, but that's before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the speech.
I'm not stereotypical Barbie pretty.
Note to the filmmakers, Margot Robbie is the wrong person to cast if you want to make this point.
Get it? It's funny because Margot Robbie is one of the producers. The best example of tones taking turns in this movie, though, is, again, the ending. Just as you thought the I'm Enough hoodie was a satisfying send-off to Ken's character arc, and one last nice little out of you before the movie sends you out of the theater in tears, the movie does just that, but then decides it's not enough. And says, "Nah, just one more vagina joke before we go." and then jump scares you with the credits. Thankfully, there is a brief moment of human Barbie in the car with a new family, and one last narration from Helen Mirren, so you might have a little time to dry your tears. And even then, the movie dodged the bullet that was tonal whiplash for so long that it was honestly just funny when they gave up and did it anyway at the very end. I know I said I can't believe this movie is real because of what a perfect mashup it is, but spelling it out like I am right now, it makes this movie feel empowering. A reminder that it is indeed possible for movies to make you laugh and cry for the same reasons, without any tonal awkwardness. This movie's case being gender norms, or just jokes about rollerblades. Now I'm just curious why there aren't more movies like this one in that respect. They made it look so easy. Have I mentioned that I've never taken a film class?
Ooh, so pretty!
If you know anything about me, you'll know that I'm a big cartoon guy, so why am I making so much love to this live-action movie? Because it's like a live cartoon? Well, in a way, yes. As much as I love the medium of animation for how limitless it is, I'm glad that this movie is live action. It was an awesome opportunity for the set and costume designers to go nuts. Nevertheless, with this movie being live action, a lot of effort would have to be poured into making Barbie Land look and feel like a world that dolls would live in. And after the writers and actors were at the top of their game for the whole 2 hours, why would they stop with the sets and costumes? A lot of the rest of the video is just going to be me geeking out about the things I just loved, as opposed to the stuff that I feel is more objectively smart and clever on behalf of the writers. But the amount of detail incorporated to make an inhabited, populated Barbie Land look like a life-size condo complex of dream houses is almost miraculous. Everything looks like it's made out of pink plastic, and there's tiny deets like the pool being flat or the items in the fridge being painted on. Ken quite literally crashes into the waves because they're plastic. And again, it bears repeating to mention the deliberately cheap sparkle effects. That's not even going over all the different costumes, which proves to movies like Frozen 2, for example, that you don't have to choose between character growth and costume upgrades. You can do both and take it to the limit. I can say right now that I'm gonna remember the character's attire a lot more in this movie than any other I can think of. Think about Ken's fur coat, or again, the Knuff hoodie, which I liked just a little bit. His and Barbie's neon roller skating outfits, or cowboy costumes, or all of Barbie's dresses. Yeah, there isn't nearly as much to talk about here, but I love the attention to detail with an emphasis on plastic set pieces and silly VFX, and John Cena mermaids. Not to mention, it's all garnished quite nicely with the predominant use of pink and occasionally blue, yellow, or green, all while keeping these colors bright, but still soft and not oversaturated. Okay, now I'm really cracked for stuff to talk about, but it is totally worth mentioning the effort that went into making Barbie Land look authentic. It's not only something I can commend, but applaud, and take note from in case I ever decide to direct a musical or something, wink wink nudge nudge. Speaking of music, I had gone too long in between the two, well, now 3 times I watched this movie. But the one thing I left the theater with on my first viewing, and has stuck with me since, is the soundtrack. My god, the songs in this movie, despite not making up a full-blown musical, are some of the most memorable, catchy, riotously funny songs I have ever heard in any movie. I've already gone over some of the especially memorable ones, like I'm Just Ken, of course, Pink by Lizzo, and What Was I Made For. I'll briefly discuss the former song in a second, but I just wanted to highlight what else this movie does right in the music department first and foremost. The songs here feel very 2010s pop, which probably sounds silly to put that way since we are still moving on from that era of music, but it helps greatly in my eyes to give the movie its own identity. It makes the movie a product of its time, but in a positive, like, I'm gonna be nostalgic for this movie and especially its songs in a few years kinda way. Off the bat, I wasn't a huge fan of Barbie World by Nicki Minaj and Ice Spice. It's alright, it's a fun remix, but hear me out here guys, Speed Drive. It's got that sweet increased amount of beats per minute that makes it so perfect for a chase scene. Again, it gives the movie so much more personality than something like this would. And it's also just catchy AF. Choose Your Fighter by Ava Max sounds like Kings and Queens by Ava Max, but it's not Kings and Queens by Ava Max, but it's still by Ava Max. Kinda like how Dance the Night by Dua Lipa sounds like Levitating by Dua Lipa, and it's not Levitating by Dua Lipa, but it's still by Dua Lipa. Man I Am by Sam Smith, while I don't love the rap verses, has a very memorable chorus, and matches the mood of the patriarchified Barbie Land really well. It nevertheless bears repeating that Pink by Lizzo and its Bad Day counterpart had me smiling and giggling profusely. And though I already went over it, I think What Was I Made For is the shining example of how they got all the right artists for these songs. A lot of movies nowadays rely on one composer for both the score and the songs if there are any. Either that, or they have all or at least most of the songs be handled by one guy, like for example Metro Boomin in Across the Spider-Verse. Make no mistake, this does give the movie its own musical identity, but oftentimes it's done because it's awfully risky throwing in a bunch of different artists with styles that tend to clash. This movie though, it doesn't find any of the next best things. Lizzo for the upbeat opening pop song, license the rights to Push by Matchbox 20 so Ken can sing it. It just fits the situation all too perfectly. Oh look, fake fire, 2 more points for the set designers. Billie Eilish being the soprano to end all sopranos for the sad finale song. Every single number here is a shoot for the moon, and that's not even mentioning I'm Just Ken, which isn't only an amazing song, but a scene that was so ridiculous and fun to watch again, that I was, again, laughing and grinning in sheer disbelief of what was on screen in front of me. They really did take it to the limit. And none of these shots for the moon miss, which is just another thing that makes this movie empowering from a filmmaking standpoint. It's not just that the writing perfectly divides its attention between both laughs and tears, which leaves it feeling like the complete package, and teaches other writers how to pull it off in the process. It's ballsy to throw all these musical artists into one cultural melting pot of 2010s pop. But much like the writing, they all have their turns to shine. As such, it meticulously avoids becoming a case of too many cooks spoiling the broth, and while that statement may not work as well for songs in a movie, since multiple songs playing at once is just terrible, I think that's just what this movie represents. Empowerment. Greta Gerwig's Barbie is a movie with a lot to say about gender stereotypes and the patriarchy. You may be shocked to hear that though. Is this a girl power movie? Yes, to an extent. I think everyone can get a real kick out of this movie, I mean, look how much I liked it. But I think the best experience is when it's a mother-daughter movie, what with a movie calling society's when it comes to the unnecessary hardships that they attach to being a woman. Best case, this could create a good opportunity for daughters to open up to their moms about their own self-esteem issues. However, is this movie trying to explicitly say that men suck and anything men do, women do it better? Oh heavens no. It might look that way for a minute, but the movie hears itself bashing those themes over the audience's heads and realizes how stupid it sounds. Remember, it's not Barbie and Ken, it's Barbie and it's Ken. And Ken is... me! And what do we as that audience get out of all of this? Effective emotional gutbusters that are hard to find anywhere else, banger musical numbers left and right, sets and costumes that you really have to give credit where credit is due with how they really look like they belong in the world of a doll, a script that's funny, witty, intelligent, and never sad, cool. And as a guy who, unlike Hollywood CEOs, loves film, feels inspired and empowered by this movie. To create, go the extra mile to reach out to others, come together with those people I reach out to in order to make my craft feel authentic, and know in my heart and soul that the project is never too big, as cheesy as that sounds. Maybe this video made somebody cry, maybe laugh, who knows. I'm really hoping I can get this video out on time, that is to say by Halloween, because I finished writing this 12-page script on October 21st, but either way, I'm so happy to make love to this expertly written, gorgeous looking and sounding, enjoyably overacted everything bagel of a movie that fills me with hope for the future of the art of cinema. Just because it's hard to count the amount of things it does right, this movie will go down as one of my absolute favorites for years to come. I somehow made it to the end of this video without mentioning Oppenheimer, but yeah, I feel like Oppenheimer will definitely get a Best Picture nomination, and it can win for all I care. It was also a great movie, but if Barbie doesn't get a nomination, well, as if you needed more proof that the Academy obviously don't watch all the movies they nominate. I mean, give I'm Just Ken the original song Oscar, and give Oppenheimer Best Original Score, those two are no-brainers. Maybe have a live performance of I'm Just Ken, and, you know, actually sticking to the song you said you would perform and not turning it into a rap about how great the Oscars are halfway through it would be nice, but, like... yeah, that's all I got for closing the video. Bye.